Night Shift Whispers.
The thin mist descended, shrouding the valley and its lush tea plantations in a veil of ethereal beauty. As dusk crept in, the chirping of insects filled the air, creating a symphony of silence. It was my first day working in a vast tea plantation. It also had an old tea factory complex from the late 18th century that had been out of operation for a long time. The tea leaves from the plantation were sold directly to third parties. Security posts were spread out at 4 points with a considerable distance between them. My job was to guard Post 1, which contained the factory complex. I was excited about my new job, even though it was in a remote area. The scenery was breathtaking, and the air was crisp and clean. I was confident that I would be happy working here for a long time. My partner and senior at Post 1 was Mr. Johan, a tall and sturdy man in his late 40s. He assured me that working here was not difficult, just a little different. I didn't take his words seriously at first, because remote places are often associated with a sense of eeriness. The sun set, and Mr. Johan and I returned to our guard post, a small cottage at the corner of the factory complex where we also lived. It had a living room, a small kitchen, a bathroom, and a bedroom that we shared, but we would not be sleeping at the same time as we had to take turns guarding. Mr. Johan offered me a cup of coffee. I insisted on making it myself, and he briefly pointed me to the ingredients before leaving to check the factory lighting. The water was boiling, and I soon brewed 2 cups of coffee on the pantry table. I carried them to the living room table, intending to wait for Mr. Johan. But I took a sip of my coffee first. Suddenly, my cup flew out of my hand and shattered into pieces. I was baffled. How could that happen? I was still holding it. I tried to ignore the strange occurrence and quickly cleaned up the mess. Then, without thinking twice, I made another cup of coffee. But the same thing happened again. The cup flew out of my hand as if pushed by an invisible force. I was starting to get scared. What was going on? Was there a ghost in the factory? Or was I going crazy? I decided to wait for Mr. Johan to return before making another cup of coffee. I didn't want to risk another flying cup incident. As I waited, I couldn't help but think about what had happened. Was it a coincidence? Or was there something more to it? I didn't know what to believe. But one thing was for sure, I was no longer in the mood for coffee. Mr. Johan didn't seem surprised when I told him about the flying cups. He just said, "You'll get used to it." But he suggested that I be polite to the entity every time I drank coffee, inviting them to join me for coffee, even if it was just in words. I was tired from the overnight journey from my hometown and hadn't had a chance to rest, so Mr. Johan told me to go to bed early. I tried to forget the unpleasant incident with the flying cups and close my eyes. At 1 a.m., I woke up to the sound of thousands of people talking and laughing in the local language. It sounded like they were coming down from the mountain. I got up and peeked out the window, but I couldn't see anyone. I decided to go outside and investigate. When I passed the guard room, Mr. Johan was gone. I walked down the winding road in front of the cottage, but there was no one there. The sound of the people talking and laughing had also disappeared. I scratched my head. Was it all just a dream? I went back to the cottage and sat in the guard room, waiting for Mr. Johan to return. When Mr. Johan arrived, he didn't seem surprised when I told him about the voices in the night. "I told you, you'll get used to it," he said. "Just ignore it." I was starting to regret taking this job, but I was stuck here now, and I had to find a way to deal with it. I decided to listen to Mr. Johann's advice and try to ignore the strange things happening around me. But it was easier said than done. Every night, I would hear the voices of the people talking and laughing. And sometimes, I would see shadows moving in the corners of my eyes. I was starting to lose sleep. I was starting to lose my mind. But I had to keep going. I had to find a way to survive in this haunted factory. The days passed, and the eerie atmosphere that had once unnerved me began to feel familiar. I no longer jumped at mysterious sounds in the middle of the night, nor did I flinch when my coffee spilled. I had become desensitized to the strangeness around me. That night, Mr. Johann and I were patrolling when he suddenly asked to go to the toilet. He told me to go ahead, he would follow me later. I was already at the warehouse when Mr. Johann left. I continued walking without thinking anything strange. Then suddenly, I heard a man's groan from under the guava tree in the corner of the warehouse yard. I stopped, my heart pounding in my chest. In our guard area, there was no one but me and Mr. Johann. Who could be there? Could it be a thief who had accidentally fallen victim to an accident? With a cautious step, I approached and shone a flashlight under the guava tree. There was someone lying there, leaning against the trunk of the tree. However, it didn't look like a thief. He was wearing a military uniform and had a rifle lying next to him. The most surprising thing was that the figure resembled the Caucasian race. A Dutch soldier? How could it be? The Dutch once ruled the interior of Asia, but their colonial rule ended decades ago. The soldier groaned in pain, looking at me with a look of pleading for help. He held his stomach. Blood was pouring from a large wound in his stomach, and his intestines were spilling out. This is not logical. Clearly the figure was not human. I ran back to the guard post, my mind racing. Two small figures laughed at me from the ditch on the left side of the road. They were playing in the water. I actually hoped that I wouldn't care who they were, but my curiosity got the better of me. I shone a flashlight on them, and my blood ran cold. They were two European-looking little boys. It didn't make a sense. I ran back to the guard post in a panic. Mr. Johann, who had just finished with the bathroom, again looked understanding at my panic movements. Let me continue the patrol. You stay here. Calm down. I stayed in the guard room, trying to calm down, but my mind was racing. Who was the wounded man under the guava tree? How did the two European-looking boys get here? And what else was lurking in the shadows of that night? As the days dragged on, my patrols were still haunted by the Dutch soldier and the two European children. The soldier's cries became a recurring nightmare, and the children's maniacal laughter echoed through my dreams. One afternoon, as I was walking through the tea plantation area, I saw a black cat walking towards a mysterious tunnel. The tunnel was hidden behind a thicket of bushes, and it was so dark that I couldn't see very far inside. But something about the cat's behavior intrigued me. It was moving with a sense of purpose, as if it knew exactly where it was going. My curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to follow the cat into the tunnel. The air inside was cold and damp, and the only light came from the faint glow of my phone's screen. I took a few tentative steps forward, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, choking me. The tunnel was narrow and winding, and I had to stoop low to avoid hitting my head on the ceiling. As I walked deeper into the tunnel, the smell of death filled the air. It was a sickening, putrid smell that made me want to gag. But I kept going. I was determined to find out where the cat was leading me. After what felt like an eternity, I finally came to the end of the tunnel. I found myself in a large room. The room was filled with human bones. Skulls, ribs, and femurs were scattered all over the floor. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that I was not alone in the room. Something was watching me, something evil. I couldn't see it, but I could feel its presence. I turned and ran back down the tunnel, my heart pounding like a drum in my ears, the rhythm of impending doom. I didn't look back until I was safely outside. When I told Mr. Johan about the bunker, he was surprised. "It's a remnant of the Dutch colonial era," he said. "Our boss warned us not to go in there. A plantation worker did once, and he was haunted by the ghost of the bunker guardian. That night, and the nights that followed, I was haunted by a malevolent presence. It was as if a heavy weight was pressing down on my shoulders, trying to force me to my knees. I could feel its icy breath on my neck, whispering threats in my ear. One night, I could bear the weight no longer. I collapsed to the ground, unconscious. When I awoke, my body was racked with pain, and I was covered in bruises. Mr. Johan told me that I had gone berserk the previous night, ransacking the cottage with superhuman strength. I had no memory of the event. In that moment, I knew that I had been possessed by one of the spirits from the tunnel. It had been enraged by my intrusion, and now it was seeking to claim me as its own. I was helpless. It kept happening over and over again. I felt like I was trapped in a cage, unable to escape. My only option was to resign. On my last day, as I stepped out of the gate, I heard a chorus of laughter behind me. The dark spirits' voices. I took a deep breath and walked away. I knew I would never come back there again.